Hey there, my name is Martha Cook, and I'm a potter teaching over at Callanwolde Fine Arts Center in Atlanta. And today I'd like to do a little lesson on making pinch pots. It's one of my favorite things to do, actually. Whenever I have the opportunity to teach pinch pots, it's always a lot of fun. I like working on the potter's wheel, I like doing hand building, but pinch pots are one of those things that I go back to over and over again for new ideas and just actually almost therapy. It makes it, making a pinch pot slows me down. It makes me really get in touch with the clay. It kind of takes everything else out of my world, and it's a wonderful thing to do. So, whenever I'm teaching a pinch pot lesson to my students, I'll always read something from a book that I have found to be really awesome. It's called Finding One's Way with Clay by Paula Sparenson. And I usually read this little passage right here that I'd like to share with you today before I start making anything. It's very helpful if you can engage in this exercise with as little prejudgment as possible. Don't decide if you like the exercise or not before you do it. Try to witness what you make without declaring it good or bad, ugly or beautiful. Such declarations seem like very heavy burdens for such young work to bear. In a very real sense, in this work, failure, if there is such a thing, can be viewed as a privilege. To make something successfully on the first try leaves you in some cases with little but a souvenir, whereas getting lost may afford you the opportunity to stop, re-examine, and begin again and again with renewed insight and perhaps even personally develop solutions to move you on with strength. These are first steps, and like those of a young child, they may be uncoordinated, uncertain, and you may fall down. But they may also be enlivened by discoveries of your own and a sense of joy and a new ability opening up. If you look at making pots like that it's a process, it's a journey, it's not all about the product. I think you'll find more joy in making whatever it is you're making. Learning to listen to the clay, learning to let the clay work with you instead of you trying to make the clay do what you want it to do is a key thing, I believe. Anyway, you're going to start with a piece of clay about the size of maybe somewhere between a plum and no larger than a tennis ball. So hold on a second, I got to grab my clay. All right, so I'm starting with this piece of clay that's just a chunk of clay, and I'm going to pat it into a ball. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but try to get it, pretty round. It's just that you don't want to do it too long. If you do this until it's perfect, you may dry out your clay too much. So that's probably good enough. If there's some major creases, if you want to sort of rub those out, I like to keep a sponge with a little water in it to keep my hands moist so that my hands don't dry out, because if my hands dry out, then the clay's going to dry out. So I like to keep it on both hands so that I can keep the clay from getting too dry. So after you've got it into a ball, and you'll see me kind of every once in a while just kind of reach down, what I'm doing is adding some moisture to my hands. Start by holding it in your hand and pushing with your thumb all the way down, almost going through the bottom, but not going through. So you want to get down inside there to where you can feel almost like maybe a fourth of an inch, maybe a tiny bit more than a fourth of an inch at the bottom. If you go too far, you'll go all the way through the bottom. So gradually, slowly, I think slowly is key, you start pinching and turning, pinching and turning, pinching and turning, all around the bottom of the pot. While it's easy to reach the bottom, that's a good time to thin it out down there. And then slowly but surely, start working your way up the side of your pot. If you try to do this too fast, you'll find that you'll lose control of it pretty easily. So as you pinch and turn, you're trying to feel the thickness of the clay and make it as even as possible. Every once in a while, if you need to touch the sponge to keep your hands moist, it's not a bad thing to do. And if you start getting some big creases or stretch marks, stress where the edge of the clay seems like it's wanting to crack, take a little moisture and dab it on there and then rub those lines out. So you notice the opening is very small at this point, and this is very thick at the top. Down inside here, it's getting to be about 1/4 of an inch. So slowly work your way up. If you push real hard, you'll get some pretty deep fingerprints. So the idea is just to kind of, I use like all of my fingers on the outside. Mostly, I guess it's mostly these first 2 or 3 fingers and my thumb on the inside. If you put multiple fingers on the inside, it'll start opening up and possibly you'll lose control of it faster. So make yourself just use your thumb at first. Now I'm starting to get closer to the top, and the hole is starting to enlarge a little bit. Any little lines or cracks there, rub those out with a little moisture. And if this thumb starts getting tired, you can switch to the other hand, but try at the very beginning of this pot to just use your thumb. Just use one finger on the inside. Keep the lip of the pot relatively thick. It's real easy to pinch that too thin. So be gentle as you pinch around the edge. You can always make it thinner, but once you've gotten it too thin, you've gotten it too thin. So slowly but surely, really feel the clay. You can't see how thick it is, but you can feel how thick it is. So as you squeeze and turn and pinch, try to really think about how thick it is and feel for any places that might be slightly thicker and try to thin those out. Okay, once I've gotten it to about this point, then I sometimes do like this little scooping motion, sort of like you're going to scoop some icing out of the bowl. So I take my hand and I just sort of scoop it on the inside and roll it in my hand. And this helps thin it out a little bit more and smooth it out a little bit more so that it's more consistent. You know, it's just a matter of being patient. It's a matter of taking your time, not being in too much of a hurry, watching the moisture of the clay. I think one of the best things about a pinch pot is that it makes you slow down, and it makes you think about what it is that you're doing. I don't know. It's just sort of has to be you getting in touch with the clay instead of you just trying to make it happen. You're learning to work with the clay. I don't know if I said that very well, but you got the idea. I used to tell my high school students years ago to listen to the clay, and they always looked at me like I was a little crazy. But so now I'm kind of pushing from the inside and puffing it out a little bit. So I'm kind of pushing up on the clay and giving it a little more volume. One of the things I've learned making pinch pots over the years is that sometimes it's good to make the pot to a certain point and then actually stop and let it rest for a while. When the clay stiffens up just a little bit, you can work with it a little bit more. Depends on what kind of pot you're trying to make. So now I'm going to put this pot down and let it rest a little bit more, let it stiffen up a little bit more, and then I'll come back to it later. This pot has been sort of sitting for a little while, so it's stiffened up just a little bit, not too much. And I noticed this little line. Can you see that little line right there? It was almost like it was just there. Okay, it was a little crease somehow. So that's the kind of thing that I like to go with and maybe accentuate. So I might start pushing around that and see if I can make it pop out even more. Sometimes that's where my ideas start from. So see how I'm just pushing into that line and making it bigger, making it deeper, making it more accentuated. I stroke the clay a lot, over and over and over, rubbing it. And I also sometimes will take a paddle. It can be a wooden spoon or just a little piece of wood, and paddle any bumps out. So sometimes I'll take a line like that and maybe come up with it. And if I push my fingernail into it, that can really accentuate it. And I just go back over and over and over until it starts to look nice. And sometimes I may say, okay, that's just going to go right back down. And then I could maybe take a pot or fingernail, come up and head back down. So then I would stroke it and rub it and rub it. So I don't know where this is going completely yet, but it seems like I've got some direction sort of started. Going back and forth between paddling some of the lumpy bumpies away, pushing some of those creases in, and then rubbing it and stroking it. Let me show you another idea. I'm going to put this one down for a minute. Alright, this is another pot, and I could just like put my finger into it and rub a line around to give it sort of a lip at the top. And I just keep going around with that all the way around the pot. Sometimes I like to let it wave a little bit up and down instead of just being perfectly straight. It's a lot more interesting, I think, for it to be more organic. And at first, it's not that pretty. To me, it takes time for it to start showing up and looking better. So I like little dips and waves. And I like for there to be little dips and waves around the top. So this is where the creative part comes in, I think. Maybe this part of the process is a bit like watching water boil. But all these little imperfections, I work with them and rub them out. You can take stick. This is just a piece of wood. And watch this. I can put a texture in there. Just whatever kind of texture you want. And this part up here could be smooth, and this part at the bottom could all be textured. This one sort of reminds me of the texture I have on this pot. And this one's one that I made a while back. It's got this same little corner piece of wood. And you wanna kind of play with this so it doesn't look too regular. I think have some variety in the way you approach the clay. And then after you do this all the way around, again, that might be too slow for me to just show you the whole thing. You can go back and push from the inside and make it more puffy and more volume. Give it some more roundness. If it gets too much and you don't like, you can paddle it back in. Here's another little pinch pot that I've started. And this is a stamp that I made out of clay. And you can take it and just sort of roll it up the side of the pot. I like texture a lot. So you can create all kinds of different textures, either with stamps that you've made or things that you found, you know, like shells or the textures of some acorns or things you find, stones. Let's see how that's starting to look pretty cool. And then you can take something like a rib and draw a line around the top, and that will give you a nice edge. If you take a pencil or some kind of tool and just draw a line, I don't think it looks as good. I much prefer pressing lines into the clay with something like a wooden rib. You getting the idea of how that could look? So I did a pot sort of like this a little while ago, and you can see it all the way around there. Kind of like the way that looks. This is a pot that my friend Glendare made, and he actually paddled this texture onto his pot with a paddle that had that texture on the back of the paddle. And then he added a coil on the bottom for it to have a little foot. I'm just going to show you some different finished pieces to give you some ideas. This is a little raku piece I did, where somewhere I probably had a fingerprint that was a little too deep, and then I decided, oh, maybe that's the idea. So then I started pushing fingerprints in all over the whole pot and accentuating them and making them more accentuated, more pronounced. I would say this pot is possibly similar to what I've started here on this one, where I just take my finger and rub in lines, and you can play with the irregularity of the lip and the irregularity of the texture. This is a pot that I made years ago with some clay that had a lot of grog in it, and I really liked the cracked nature of the clay, and I accentuated that by putting that heavy grog into the clay and then putting a stain on the outside. Here's one that has feet added to it. So I can show you how to do that maybe in a minute. And here's a couple others that have some little feet. Pinch pots can be small as well. And I think these little guys are just adorable. Clay is not supposed to be cute, but this one's cute. So, and this has just got little piece, you know, some kind of a little tool pushed into it to give it that texture. And then I added some little feet and some little handles. So let's see, let's take this pot. Maybe I'll go ahead and finish putting the texture around here, and then I'll come back and put the feet on it. Alright, so I've got 3 little pieces of clay, 3 little balls of clay, all the same size. And I'm going to make these into feet. And I'm going to put them on the bottom of this pot. Sort of like the feet on the bottom of this one. Okay? Alright, so I take these, make all 3 of the balls first so that they're all the same size. Because if you make 1 foot and then make the others, you may not get the amount of clay the same. So I kind of roll it a bit into a teardrop, so it's fatter on the bottom and skinnier on the top, and then kind of flatten it out on the bottom like a Hershey's Kiss. So just a little roll. And this is just one way to make feet. There's lots of different ways to do it, so have fun playing with it. So then when you put them on the bottom, and you have to kind of play with this to make sure they're the right size. These may be a tiny bit big, but let's go with it. So it helps to turn it over and kind of get a look and make sure that your placement's about right. And then you want to score. and score the bottom of this. Add a little moisture or slip in between there, and then holding from the inside, kind of push it on and squeeze it on there good. So score, score, add a little slip or a little moisture, put it on there, hold from the inside, push pretty hard up against the clay. Last one, score there, score there. The moisture or the slip, I believe, is very important. And then squish that on. Try to make sure your spacing is about right. And then turn it over, kind of bounce it a little bit to get a nice flat bottom. Alright, so if you want to put little handles, something like this, again, you have to figure out how big the piece of clay needs to be. Sometimes I'll make a handle and it looks too big, so then I take it off and do it again. Don't be afraid to take it off and do it again. Just because you put it on there and it's not right does not mean you need to leave it on there. So be ready to make improvements if necessary. This pot is not finished yet. Probably I could sit here and play with this pot for another 30 minutes, but I'm not going to do that to you. Okay, first of all, I want to get 3 little pieces of clay, all the same size. And keep my hands moist, because if I roll this little bit of clay around in my hand and my hands are dry, then I have dry little clay balls, and they're not as easy to work with. Okay, so I'm going to roll that into a little tube, a little cylinder shape, and then I'm going to kind of bend it and pinch it. We'll see if that looks about the right size. Yeah, I think that'll be all right. So watch that again. You roll it into a little tube, grab it by both sides, it's almost like you're pushing it up and pushing it down, and that gives you a little handle. There's another one, and here's my third one. If I have 3 feet, I want 3 handles. If I have 4 feet, I should put 4 handles. You want your pot to be unified. Alright, so you slip and score, and I'm going to put this handle right above each foot. So slip there, or score there, score here. And I'm trying to go pretty fast so that I don't take too long for you, but take your time as much as you need to. Score that, score this, and then before you put them on, add a little slip or moisture. Push that on there, a little slip or moisture, push that on there. What do you think? Alright, so hopefully you got some ideas to play with. You can use handles or feet or not, but the world of pinch pots is huge. Enjoy and have lots of fun. Alright, bye.